Hi, good morning. This is Sean Kelly with DGI Training. Thank you for joining us this morning for Tech Control Annual Regulation Update for 2018. I have a feeling that it's going to be a short one today for several reasons. For 49 CFR, and we all know 49 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, which I affectionately refer to as our American law. I mean, when it comes down to it, this is the one that we need to comply with, 49 CFR. They only had one major final rule that was eventually incorporated into 49 CFR. And this same final rule was HM 215N, which we'll discuss here shortly. But it was an international standard. It was created at the United Nations, and it filtered down, so all of the regulations have the same updates. And IATA and the IMDG code gave them to us. So we should be fairly familiar with these new requirements. The other side is the IMDG code. It comes out every 2 years. In the even years, they present, at the end of the year, the end of the even years, they present this regulation. It's good for 2 years. The following odd year, where we are now in 2017, represents a transition period. So the new requirements, they give us a whole year to implement these changes, a whole year transition period. So now we're finished with 2017, transition is over with, January 1st, 2018, all of these changes in the IMDG code become mandatory. But we've already talked about them. We've been working with them for a year. So none of them should come as any surprises. This webinar is for informational purposes only. It's not considered recurrent training. There is no exam, and you will not receive a certificate. I can suggest to you, however, that you can put a memo on company stationery explaining that you attended this informational webinar, which discussed all of the changes, not all of, the majority of significant changes that affected our hazardous material regulations, both domestically and internationally. This is me in at Victoria Falls, Africa. Victoria Falls is fed primarily by the Zambezi River, and it forms a natural border with Zambia and Zimbabwe, and Botswana is not far away. I'm pretty sure that I'm standing in Zambia at this moment. If you have not had the opportunity to go to Africa, I strongly suggest you do. So we're going to start off with 49 CFR. And as a refresher, as a reminder, Government 101, if you can think back to high school, maybe some of you had it in junior high school, but how a bill becomes law. In the Department of Transportation, it's not much different. And if they feel the need for a new requirement, they propose it. And they make this notice of proposed rule. And the notice of proposed rule gets published in the Federal Register. And industry and the public, we have sometimes 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, might be a year. We have a specific time to respond to the notice of proposed rulemaking. At the end of that discussion period, the Department of Transportation will then consider all of the comments they received during that comment period. And they will either include these comments or suggestions or recommendations into the new bill or proposed rule, which then becomes a final rule. And once it becomes a final rule, it carries the same weight as the regulation. A final rule carries the same weight as 49 CFR. And then when 49 CFR goes to the GPO, the Government Printing Office, then those new final rules will be incorporated into the new regulations. And as you guys probably know already, that the United States government operates on a fiscal calendar. It ends on September 30th, the annual budget, it ends on September 30th, and it begins on October 1st. So it's not until October that all of these government agencies and administrations, they get their budget to go to work. So sometime in the end of the year, the government printing office receives a whole bunch of money to start printing these federal regulations. And we have been using this early bird version from Label Master, which incorporates all of the new final rules. But the actual government copy might not come out until March or April of the following year. So even though this date from Label Master, the date on the front cover, has October 1st, 2017, it is the most current version of 49 CFR. There was one safety advisory notice that I picked up on this year, happened to cover DOT 39 cylinders exceeding 1.23 or 1.25 liters, and they are recommending or advising us against filling or transporting these cylinders when they contain a flammable gas. So be on the lookout for DOT 39 cylinders when they contain liquefied, flammable, compressed, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, cyclopropane, ethane, or ethylene, or liquefied petroleum gases. So no flammable gases in DOT 39 cylinders which exceed 1.23 liters. The Department of Transportation also increased the amount of a fine, a knowing fine. You guys know the difference between a civil penalty and a criminal penalty? A civil penalty is when you make a mistake, and the amount of the fine might be in the tens of thousands of dollars. If you do something knowingly, it's a crime. When you knowingly violate the law, it's a crime. And the criminal penalties for a crime are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, including the possibility of jail time. So the difference between a civil penalty and a criminal penalty. This was really the only final rule that the Department of Transportation published in 2016. I should say, the only final rule the Department of Transportation published that affected 49 CFR parts 100 through 185. And again, all of these changes came from the United Nations. And before 49 CFR published them, we had already seen them in the IMDG code and IATA. But as a highlight, you probably know that they've introduced new proper shipping names and UN numbers for engines. Up until this year, engines and vehicles, they all carried the same UN number, UN 3166. What they did, or what they have done now, is that they assigned UN numbers, UN 3528 for an engine that uses regular gasoline, UN 3529 for an engine that uses flammable gas like propane or natural gas, and UN 3530, which is an engine that uses gas or uses gas that might be a danger to the environment. So all of these engines now, 3528, 3529, 3530, they're marked according to that hazard class, class 3, class 2.1, or class 9. Also in 49 CFR, section 173.185, which is really the only section we have for transporting lithium batteries by all modes. 49 CFR is a federal regulation. It's available free online. So if you were to Google 173.185, you're going to get the current version as it applies to lithium batteries. You should, at the gpo.gov website. The they call it E49 CFR or ECFR. I strongly suggest if you don't have a copy of the regulations and you ship lithium batteries, pull that up on the internet and print it. It's about 2 pages, maybe 2.5 pages long, and it's all of our requirements right there in a nutshell. We also have new entries for 4.1s, new entries for resin kits, a whole bunch of special provisions, and changes for training, marking, labeling, and documentation. The training, I can pretty much say for 49 CFR and IATA, they added a section for the lithium batteries saying that if small accepted lithium batteries are the only hazardous materials training, the only hazardous materials that you ship, then your only training requirement is focused on those lithium batteries and how to ship them. Marking, labeling, documentation, we'll talk more about. This I left over from the previous year. This shows a rail car, and whether you realize it or not, a rail car is considered a package, and they are increasing the standards for these rail cars, going from a single wall rail car to a double wall rail car. Here's another holdover from 2016. I think it's important because we continue to have challenges with these lithium batteries, and the whole requirement, the whole need for this regulation, which the Department of Transportation calls reverse logistics. This evolved because of the problems with lithium batteries. The Samsung Galaxy 7, Note 7, whatever it was, a number of other products powered by lithium batteries being recalled by the manufacturer because of the defective lithium batteries. So our government came out with this animal called reverse logistics. It puts the onus on the manufacturer, and the manufacturer must educate the consumer on how to return these damaged or defective lithium batteries if they are authorized to be returned. Generally, a defective battery, insofar as it won't hold a charge. If it won't hold a charge and it doesn't get hot and there's no damage to it, we can send it back. But if it's damaged or it's overheating, it's leaking something, no, you're not going to be able to return damaged or leaking lithium batteries. But become familiar with the term reverse logistics. As a pilot, an attack helicopter pilot in the Army, reverse logistics means a whole nother thing to me. That's about putting lead on the target. But the DOT has adopted it, reverse logistics, and it focuses primarily on returning defective batteries. Another holdover, a whole bunch of special permits. A special permit, also sometimes referred to as a competent authority. Sometimes they're synonymous. It's permission from the government. It's permission from the government to operate outside of the regulations. And our government had a problem with the amount of paperwork involved with special permits. Everybody had to fill out an application. It was printed, and they've been doing it since the 1950s. They've had gazillions of special permits on file, and what they're doing is trying to consolidate them. And those special permits that have been on the books for decades, and there have been no accidents or incidences as a result of these special permits, they're trying to incorporate them into the regulations. E-cigarettes, just like any other lithium battery, they pose a risk. And you may notice this if you travel through the airports. They don't want it in your checked bags. They'd rather not have them at all. But the whole idea behind any lithium batteries in the cargo compartment of an airplane, they have what's called thermal, this inherent characteristic called thermal runaway. They get hot, they catch on fire, they explode, and they cannot duplicate it in the laboratory. They don't know why the lithium batteries are heating up, catching on fire, and exploding. But what they do know is that they do not want this to happen in the cargo compartment of a passenger airplane. So lithium batteries are prohibited as cargo on passenger airplanes. We'll talk more about those as well. Another holdover, these you see the old Class 9 label there, hazard warning label, and the new one. The new one does not have a horizontal line, and I hope nobody is still having issues with that. The new label does not have a horizontal line connecting the vertical black bars. Then on the other side, on the left side, we have a newer, they're calling this the Class 9A label, Class 9A label, which has picture of batteries on them. They're supposed to be lithium batteries. And we have a new lithium battery mark. And when we start talking about the IATA regulations, you're going to see that last year in 2016, they called this a lithium battery handling label. Well, this year and going forward, it's now referred to as the lithium battery mark. So they changed all the regulations and changing the name of this thing from a label to a mark. Both of these, the Class 9A label and the new lithium battery handling mark, were introduced this year in 2017. They gave us all of this year, and they're giving us all of next year through December 31st, 2018 as a transition period. Effective January 1st, 2019, these new marks and labels will be mandatory. If you don't know ORM-D, it stands for Other Regulated Material Domestic. And they eliminated, we used to have ORM-D air. They eliminated that in 2012. They wanted to do both air and ground. But the industry in the United States put up a fight. And the requirement to eliminate ORM-D, first it went from 2012 to 2014. Then I think they went to 2018. Industry was still complaining, and the DOT said, okay, enough is enough. We'll make it till December 31st, 2020, and ORM-D will be dead, no more. So we still have a couple years using ORM-D if you still are. It's being replaced by this black and white label here, limited quantity. If you're shipping by ground, that is the only requirement, is that black and white mark. No shipping paper is required, no UN spec box, no other marking or labeling. That's it, the limited quantity mark. So that was 49 CFR. I'm going to roll right into the IMDG code. You see it's Amendment 3816. It's the 38th Amendment. It was published in 2016 and released October, November. So this was just released October, November 2016. They gave us all of 2017 as a transition period. And now in 2018, the even years, these requirements become mandatory. And at the end of 2018, they're going to give us another book, good for another 2 years. 2019 will be a transition period, and 2020, wow, can you believe I'm saying that? 2020, right around the corner. In 2020, in the next edition of the IMDG code, they'll be mandatory. So odd years are transition periods, even years are mandatory. When shipping by ocean, we can use either limited quantity mark. You know that when shipping a limited quantity by air, it has to have a big fat Y in the middle of it. When shipping by ground or ocean, no Y is required. But shipping by ocean and or ground, they'll take either one. It's too bad air does not. But what's going to happen, I believe, is that eventually, why don't we just use the one with the Y? You know, I'm going to point this out in the IMDG code in Chapter 2 or Section 2. We all know that there's 9 different hazard classes, right? Class 1 is explosives. So if I want to find the definition of explosives, I'm going to go to Section 2.1. How about a flammable liquid? What hazard class is a flammable liquid? A flammable liquid is a hazard class 3. So if I want to find the definition of a flammable liquid in the IMDG code, I go to section 2.3. How about a corrosive material? What hazard class is a corrosive material? It's a class 8. So if I want to find the definition of a corrosive material in the IMDG code, I go to section 2.8. So these are the changes to section 2. This particular slide, we're talking about an NOS, or not otherwise specified. And apparently up until this point, it was forbidden to show a material that has a subsidiary risk as an NOS entry. Now they're saying we can ship it if we get approval from the government, or we use the most appropriate proper shipping name, which has always been the norm. So I don't think this is a big deal. There's new criteria for fireworks, new criteria for viscosity testing. You know what viscosity is? Viscosity, well, in my terms, in layman terms, it's how thick is the liquid? How quickly does the liquid flow? And they use viscosity testing to determine whether the material is a liquid or a solid. If it doesn't flow, if it's a real thick paste, has no viscosity. So chances are that's going to be classified as a flammable solid rather than a flammable liquid. They changed polymerizing substances to class 4.1, and we have new definitions for gases, flammable liquids, poisons, and corrosives, which are all prohibited for transport. Let me back up a moment. Not all of those hazard classes are prohibited for transport, but particular items within those hazard classes are prohibited for transport. Here are the new UN numbers for engines that I talked about at the beginning. UN 3528, 3529, and 3530. There's also new packing instructions. There's new special provisions, segregation requirements. Polyester resin kits have been separated into 2 entries, one for liquids and one for solids. I'm happy to see this. You know, epoxy kits. Apparently some of those materials that comes in a 2-part epoxy, and they're not compatible with each other, generally speaking. But because they're in smaller quantities, designed and packaged the way they are, they allow them to be shipped. Polyester resin kits, they have a liquid-based material, 3269 and 3527 for solid-based materials. Now we're in section 3 of the IMDG code. This is the list of dangerous goods. Right behind the list of dangerous goods, they have the special provisions. Right behind the special provisions, they have section 3.4 for limited quantities and 3.5 for accepted quantities. But here in special provisions, special provision 188, they talk, this is the requirement in the IMDG code for smaller accepted lithium cells and batteries. If you have a small accepted lithium battery, which complies with the requirements in special provision 188, you get the little lithium battery label. I'm sorry, this year it's a mark. You get the lithium battery handling mark. If you do not qualify for the requirements in special provision 188, it's a class 9 material. And this is the new class 9 label, label 9A for lithium batteries. So smaller ones get the mark, and if you can't meet the requirements for the small batteries, it's a big boy. It's fully regulated. It's a class 9. When you're shipping by air, there are some situations when the packing instruction, I'll mention it later on, air's coming up, but it might require both. But generally speaking, smaller batteries get the lithium battery mark. fully regulated, large batteries, more than 100 watt hours, more than 2 grams per battery, gets a Class 9 label. Here are the special provisions that have been added because of the engines, the changes to the entries for engines and vehicles. They've added special provision 310 for prototype and low production lithium batteries, as well as a new packing instruction, P910. Packing instruction P005 has been added for engines. P412 has been added for polyester resin kits. And I just explained that pack instruction 910 for prototype lithium cells and batteries. Another packing instruction, new, large package, LP. Large package 200 has been added for aerosols. I'd love to see that, man. That's one big aerosol. They mentioned the marking requirement for overpack has to be 12 millimeters high. Then there's also a requirement for marking the UN number and UN specification marking on a UN spec box. If the package is more than 30 liters or 30 kilos, it has to be 12 millimeters high. If it's less than 30 liters or 30 kilos, it has to be 6 millimeters high. Ladies and gentlemen, I would be focusing on 12 millimeters. And for the overpack marking and the shipper's requirement to mark the proper shipping name and UN number on the package, then stick with 12 millimeters. Make everything 12 millimeters. There will never be an issue. And we're not talking much in difference between 12 millimeters and 6 millimeters. We've already discussed the new Class 9 label. Label model number 9A. 9A. This requirement was actually introduced in the middle of 2015 out of nowhere. They're calling it container weight verification, and they've given us 2 methods to comply with the container weight verification. It came out in the middle of 2015 as a note of July 2015. Then it was incorporated here. Excuse me. So the 2 ways to comply with it is you get the empty tariff weight off the data plate of the container. You weigh every single package that goes into the container and you add everything up. Method number 2 is you drive the truck across the scale, get an empty weight, fill it, and then go weigh it again on the truck scale and get the heavy weight. But documentation has to be provided for container weight verification. Section 7, they realigned column 16A and 16B. You know that column 15 has the EMS number. In column 16A and 16B, stowage and segregation codes. Man, we got to do a lot of stuff to determine whether or not the materials are compatible when shipping by ocean. So if there's a code in 16A, stowage and handling, and or a code in 16B for segregation, we have to go to section 7 and see what those codes are. Do not load next to acids. Do not load with alkalis. Do not load with corrosives, whatever it might be. And in addition, we have to, as always, confirm with the segregation table. And we also have to look in column 17 at the very end at properties and observations to make sure we can load different materials together. So it's no longer just packing a container. We have to be exactly sure what we're putting in there. All in section 7. Lastly, we come to IATA. International Air Transport Association. They call this the Dangerous Goods Regulations, but in reality, it's the Policy and Procedures Manual for the International Air Transport Association. This is the trade association of the commercial airlines. Virtually every commercial airline in the world is a member of IATA. So if we want to ship dangerous goods on a commercial airplane, we have to comply with their requirements. In section 2.3, there's a table, and for 2 years in a row, as far as I can remember, maybe longer, on pages 24 and 25, they have these two tables there of items that can be carried in the cabin, in checked baggage, or carry-on bags by passengers and crew. And what they've done is that they've increased the amount of spare batteries that we can carry on board the airplane for portable electronic devices. And they also separated these portable electronic devices. Some portable electronic devices are used for medical care. They might be used to generate oxygen for a passenger that needs oxygen, or other medical devices. So they've separated them, and they say here that the limit is a maximum of 15 portable electric devices and a maximum of 20 spare batteries. My God, that's a lot of batteries. I can't imagine somebody coming on with that many batteries, but it's there. And this might be what the regulation says, but naturally the air carrier, and I'd like to see you get all that stuff through TSA as well. Section 2.8 is operator variations. Actually, 2.8 is state and operator variations. And you need to be up on them. You can find the variations all throughout the regulations, but specifically in the packing instructions, when you go look at a packing instruction in the yellow pages, the first thing you see are state and operator variations. And they give us this little code, whether it's with 2 digits or 3 digits. We have to go to section 2.8 and we have to look at them. They may very well limit you on what you can take on that airline, on that carrier. So pay attention to the operator variations, state and operator variations. You know how I just explained in the IMDG code that section 2 was laid out by hazard class? 2.1 was for explosives, 2.3 was for flammable liquids, 2.8 was for corrosive materials. IATA does the same thing, but it's in section 3. So section 3.1 gives you the definition of explosives, 3.3 gives you the definition of flammable liquids, 3.8 gives you the definition of a corrosive liquid, and 3.9 gives us the definitions for class 9 material. Well, what do we have in class 9? Well, we have lithium batteries, we have dry ice, life-saving appliances. Whatever that class 9 might be, they've made an effort to get all of these definitions in section 3.9. It's user-friendly. It makes it easy to use. Section 4 is the blue pages, or the list of dangerous goods. And right behind the blue pages, they have a numerical listing. If you only have the UN number, you can go to that numerical listing. And then right behind the numerical listing, they have the special provisions. Special provisions generally tighten up the regulations. They're going to make us jump through another hoop. Usually. Now and then we might find a special provision that relaxes the regulations, but more often than not, they're tightening up the regulations. We have to jump through another hoop. We have to make sure that we comply with the special provisions. A70 is talking about engines, and that we now have to produce a document or a statement that says that it's been cleaned and flushed, or flushed and purged and cleaned. And the operator's been requiring that forever anyway. A203 says that if a vehicle is powered by an engine that uses both flammable liquid and a flammable gas, like propane, butane, or natural gas, it has to be transported under the entry vehicle flammable gas powered. A lot of people get confused when they see flammable gas powered. They think we're talking about gasoline. No, flammable gas powered is gas as in lighter than air. This is a 2.1. And the reason that they're going to insist that you transport it as a flammable gas powered is because the flammable gas is much more dangerous. It presents a much higher risk than a flammable liquid. Section 5 is the yellow pages. It tells us how to do it. It tells us how to do our job. They talk about now segregation requirements for lithium batteries by themselves. UN 3090 is a lithium metal battery, non-rechargeable. UN 3480 is a lithium ion battery, rechargeable. These batteries, these UN numbers by themselves, and that's what these UN numbers identify. These UN numbers say these are batteries by themselves. Batteries by themselves are prohibited as cargo on passenger airplanes, i.e. cargo aircraft only. The new requirement here is that we can no longer load them with Class 1 explosives other than 1.4S. We can no longer load them with flammable gases, flammable liquids, flammable solids, or oxidizers. Even though they're a Class 9, which is compatible with everything, I think they realize, well, wait a minute, these might be more dangerous than we think. And if that, again, is to get hot, catch on fire, explode with these other hazard classes, wow, could be devastating. So we'll see this again. Again, batteries by themselves may not be loaded with those divisions, classes and divisions. We have new packing instructions for our new vehicles. Packing instruction Y960, you may not ship a packing group 1. Packing groups define the degree of danger. A packing group 1 represents the most dangerous, packing group 2 a medium danger, and packing group 3 a minor danger. These regulations have been around for 50 years, and they're getting better and better and better. So if packing group 1 represents the highest degree of danger, why would we take a chance and ship it as a limited quantity? This is true with all packing group 1s that I'm aware of. There may be an exception, but generally speaking, packing group 1s may not be shipped as a limited quantity. Also in packing instructions 965 and 968 for batteries by themselves, we cannot package them together with the class 1, 2.1, 3, 4.1, 5.1. We cannot package them together, and they cannot go in the same overpack together. Just as with the ocean requirements, here is your new lithium battery mark. And we have to put on here, is this a UN 3480, 3481, or is it a UN 3090 or a 3091? Guess what? It has to be 12 millimeters high. I'm telling you, man, get smart on the 12 millimeters, all marking requirements, make them 12 millimeters, there will never be any issues. Section 9 is a handling section. I think primarily applies to the air carriers, to the airlines. As you guys probably know, and I love to point this out when I'm giving a class, table 9.3.A, 9.3.alpha is our little segregation table. And it used to say in note 2, underneath the segregation table, don't look for class 1.4S or 4.1 in the segregation table because they're compatible with everything. Well, guess what? The lithium batteries are no longer compatible with 4.1, so they had to add 4.1 to the segregation table. You know, Appendix A is an alphabetical listing of definitions. They call it the glossary. In Appendix B, they've added some cargo codes for our lithium batteries. Rechargeable battery M, 968 RPM, and no, that's for metal. Lithium battery metal, 968, and battery ion, 965. So those are the two new codes for lithium batteries, metal and ion. These two new IMP codes facilitate the differentiation of fully regulated lithium batteries from those packed with equipment or contained in equipment, UN 3091 and 3481, which currently have codes RLM and RLI respectively. Appendix D, this is the list of competent authorities, has been updated around the world. It's an alphabetical listing of countries. It has the names, the addresses, emails, and phone numbers of the competent authority in those countries. Appendix E and F have to do with UN specification packaging suppliers and testing facilities. I get quite a few questions, phone calls about where can I get a UN specification box for this product or whatever. Chances are there's a box on the market. There's a package on the market, and we just have to find it. Appendix E and F would be a good place to start. They've added Appendix I, which is going to provide the details of the changes that come into effect January 2019, based on the changes at the United Nations. All of these requirements come from the United Nations. So if you want to find out what's coming down the pipe, what's up for next year, we can look in Appendix I. Here are some of the changes that from this year's book, 2018 to 2019. They're replacing most instances of the word risk, and they're using the word hazard. It's a hazard class. Subsidiary hazard, subsidiary risk. They're also changing the definitions for corrosive substances. This came about because of GHS, Global Harmonization System, GHS. I have a blog where I discuss and explain what GHS is. I'm not going to take your time here. There's a new requirement for manufacturers and subsequent distributors of lithium batteries to make available the UN test. You've heard me say a few times now that these lithium batteries have this inherent characteristic called thermal runaway. They get hot, they explode, and they catch on fire all by themselves. What they have determined is that if the battery is manufactured under strict quality control and it meets all of these manufacturing requirements, the chances of the battery experiencing thermal runaway goes way down. UPS, United Parcel Service, they started last year saying, show us the documentation that is in fact a UN approved lithium battery. So now they're telling us 2019, you're going to have to prove it. Show me this is a new lithium battery. As I said, also, it's no longer a lithium battery handling label. It's now a lithium battery mark. They've given us a 2-year transition period. We're halfway through that transition period. Starting January 1st, 2019, mandatory. This is a holdover from last year. Ladies and gentlemen, this cargo aircraft only label, the one that says danger on it, is not working anymore. Get rid of them. We're using cargo aircraft only. You know, this is also a holdover. At the end of 2016, they got rid of this requirement. We used to have to provide a battery information sheet. And the battery information sheet said that this is a lithium battery, do not load it if it's damaged, handle with care, and a phone number. Well, that's everything that the lithium battery mark has on it. So they did away with the requirement, and some of you are still trying to use this lithium battery information sheet. The lithium battery information sheet is no longer required. Also, no longer required on the shipper's declaration is your title. You still have to sign it, and they left the signature block there, title and signature or something like that, but it's not mandatory to put your title. Here is, they included this in section 8. If an airway bill is used, that you can put that the material is not restricted. And if you happen to see one of these little funny red, white, and black pictograms, that's what they call them, pictograms, this is the GHS requirement. So if a manufacturer produces a material that's regulated in the workplace, they have to put one of these pictograms on there. Now, just because it's regulated in the workplace does not mean that it's regulated in transportation. And that's what this section is saying in 8.2.6.2. As I mentioned earlier, I've written an article about this. It's at our website on our blog, dgitraining.com/blog. And you can find out all about these GHS requirements. And you need to be up on them. GHS, Global Harmonization System, is an international requirement, but in the United States, we have OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They regulate dangerous goods in the workplace, and they're in 29 CFR. The transportation of dangerous goods is 49 CFR, and OSHA publishes 29 CFR. And they're strictly regulated in the workplace, and training is required. I think that's going to do it for us, ladies and gentlemen. You know how to get a hold of me. If you're sitting here watching this webinar now, you know how to get a hold of me. Our numbers on every one of these slides, and inside the front cover of every DGI workbook is my name, telephone number, and my email. I am on the East Coast of the United States. I live in northern Florida. There is my telephone number and my email. I prefer email, but however you want. If I can help you in any way, please send me an email, give me a call, and we'll make it right. Thank you again for using DGI. Some of you I know have been with us since our existence 25 years ago. We're very, very grateful. I'm grateful. I look forward to working with you again. Wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I'll be talking to you soon. Thank you very much.